Welcome to the Bros of Gardening. I'm your host, Mike Westphal, and I'm joined as always with Daniel Van Dyke, my co-host, and Alex, who is here to kind of keep us in line and ask us questions and keep us on track. So how you guys doing?
Doing pretty good. How about you, Daniel?
I'm doing good. Ready to get back to it. You know, it's been a long summer. It's been a little hot, but I'm looking forward to some cooler weather and getting back into the podcast. So I'm excited about it.
Yeah, we took a little bit of a break so we could enjoy our summer. And as we were, of course, all very, very busy, I'm sure, we got some time to spend, with our families and maybe in our own yards.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Well, great. So we got a lot to talk about. Fall is quickly approaching. I mean, it's basically here. I mean, I usually feel like September is kind of the start of fall. I know it's not officially on the calendar that it's fall, but I feel like, the cooler air. We've had a weird summer. I mean, it got really hot, really early, especially here in our area, in the southeast part of Virginia Beach, Virginia. Got very warm, and then all of a sudden we had the craziest August ever.
Yeah.
I mean, it was one of the coolest Augusts, I think, probably ever. So it's kind of really got us into the fall mood here pretty quickly. And as, of course, we get into the fall season, we talk about why is fall the best time to plant?
Yeah.
So that's what we're here to discuss today, right, Alex?
Yeah, absolutely. So when customers are asking about why fall planting matters, what's your go-to response?
So I always talk about roots. I mean, fall is the best time to plant because this is when roots develop. This is when roots grow. So, especially when we're talking about trees and shrubs and perennials, your long-standing outdoor plants that come back year after year. This is when the roots develop because all of that photosynthesis, the whole process of producing food for themselves, is when it pushes all of that into the root system and it explodes underground. And this is when plants develop root systems. So it's a great time to plant for that mainly, but also it's a cooler season. So you don't have to deal with the stress, of heat coming in the summer. You got the longest time before the summer hits again. So if you're planting a shrub, you get all of fall, winter, and spring to go through before summer hits, when that stressful time can happen on those plants. Typically, we get a little bit more rain. So that's typically, what we'll have in the fall is a little bit more rain. And so you just have a lot less transplant shock. And I think it's a little bit easier on us too when we're out there planting.
Absolutely. Yeah, for sure. I mean, that's basically what I always explain to customers too is, like Mike said, in order to get a plant established for the long term, talking about your shrubs and your trees, whether it's a retail customer, a landscape customer, it's all about getting your plants acclimated to that area. And as the quicker you can do that, the better off you're going to be. And that's what I always talk about as well, is trying to maximize that time between planting and your next warm season. Because around here, in my experience, the summer can be more detrimental than the winters around here. A lot of people associate winter because things, defoliate and go dormant. But really, for me, the summer, from a success of the plant standpoint, is a lot more difficult than the winter. So if you can plant, early to mid-fall, you're going to give yourself about 8 to 9 months before that summer heat hits. So to piggyback off what Mike said, I mean, that's always my big thing, is getting it acclimated. It's easier on you both physically from a planting standpoint and the actual process, but also just a care standpoint. And that's huge for you, and then also the success of your plants long term.
Yeah, and I think people, when you think of fall, you think of the changing of the leaves on the trees, right? So that process is really what we're talking about, which is kind of what I mentioned in the beginning, which is all of that food that they produce. Now the days are getting shorter. They're not getting as much food production. So that is why the leaves start to change color. The chlorophyll is actually being sucked out of the leaves because they don't need it. That's what changes the color of the leaves. And then they drop them because they don't need the leaves because they're not producing as much food. So all of that food goes into the root system. Wow. And that's when it develops. And so you can kind of think of the trees, because that's typically what we think of in the fall, when, you get to see those bright yellows and the burgundies and the reds. Right. And that's really what the trees are saying is, hey, I'm shutting down for this season. I'm sending all my energy into the root system, and I'll be better for it next year. It's pretty cool.
All right. So Daniel, let's talk a little bit about landscape. So for your landscape projects, how does fall planting help set trees and shrubs up for long-term success?
So yeah, I mean, it's pretty much, it all kind of works in the same way. So from a landscape standpoint, a lot of times what I consider to be one of the bigger differences between, say, like a landscape project being installed or maybe somebody who's doing it a little bit more on their own is usually the scale of the project.
Right.
So, we'll come in and we could plant 100 plants, whether that's a combination of trees, shrubs, perennials, whatever the case may be. And so obviously, when you have that many plants going in, you want to do everything in your power to make sure those plants are going to succeed. Because if you don't take care of them, they're not, prepped. We talked about prep last and, in the spring a lot. And so if you do all those things correctly, then it's kind of after they're planted, the success of the plant is independent on really watering and then also just the transplant shock, like Mike mentioned, and all those things start to reduce in the fall. And so that's what I always look at is, we want to set customers up for success, but then we kind of hand them the keys to the car and say, okay, we've done everything we can do from a prep standpoint. Everything's ready to go. Now you just have to kind of take care of it and maintain it. Right. We talked about low maintenance, but as we always say, there's no such thing as no maintenance. And so that really comes back to watering. And so it's easier on the customer themselves from a fall planting standpoint. You don't have to water quite as often. You're not going to notice as much transplant shock. Getting the root system established and acclimated is going to make it easier on you 9 months from now when the summer heat does hit. And that's really what we're trying to do is just make it as easy on the customer as possible and set them up for success. So that's why when we do have a lot of people who might, call us and say, hey, I want to plant, but, do we need to wait till spring? I mean, we get that question a lot. And like Mike was saying, because maybe it's just a connotation with the leaves and the defoliation and things going dormant. But no, like I said, I love planting in the fall for that reason. It makes it easier on the customer, sets them up for success. And especially when you're trying to maintain 100 plants, 50 plants, whatever the case may be, if you don't have to water as often, you're not as worried about transplant shock and those types of things. It just makes it a lot easier on you and sets them up for success long term.
Yeah. And you want to be outside in the fall.
Yeah.
I mean, I think everybody, after a summer, we always talk about spring. It's like you come out of winter and you want to get outside.
Right.
Well, summer is kind of the same thing. You're always kind of hunkering down inside every once in a while to cool off. And it's like, oh, finally I can enjoy the outdoors for a longer period of time. And it's just kind of quintessential for gardening to happen at that time. And so it's a great time to get out
our
there.
guys certainly love the fall. Coming out of summer, you get out of the summer months, the crew and the foreman, I always say, we get that first 70-degree day and everybody's like, oh man, but it's funny because on the backside of that in spring, when you get that first 70-degree day, you're like, oh my God, it's kind of hot. So now we're just waiting for the 70-degree days. But yeah, no, Mike hit the nail on the head. It's easier to work outside as well. Just, and then, quality's better, when you're not hot and tired. Yeah. Sometimes the actual planting itself is a little bit easier to dig that root ball twice the size when it's not 100 degrees outside. So
great for the customers, great for our staff.
Sure.
Great time of the year.
Absolutely. So Mike, people can be really passionate about making their lawns perfect. So why is fall the prime time for seeding or maintaining grass?
So very similar point that I made earlier, which is this is, a cooler season. Typically when we're talking about lawns, we're talking about fescue right now. So, I think everybody kind of goes back to the spring. Spring is, when everybody's getting geared up to do stuff outdoors. And so people typically say, let me go get started on my lawn. Well, it's actually fall is the better time for fescue. Now, we're in a transition zone. Not everybody in the U.S. is in a transition zone where you can do two different types. You can do a summer grass, which would be like Bermuda, zoysia, St. Augustine. But fescue has always been one of the most renowned grasses because it's tall, it's dark green, it's really, really pretty. It's like, the softest, nicest lawn you can have. It does take a little bit more maintenance sometimes, but fall is the time to plant that because when does fescue struggle? In the summer. So this gives it the longest time to get established. And a lot of people have developed lots and lots of different programs. I know here at McDonald Garden Center, we definitely have developed a very long-standing lawn program, especially developed around fescue, where we can simplify it and make it very easy for the customers to understand and for you to implement yourself or landscape to install. I mean, they do a lot of sodding. All of it goes back to it's a cooler season. This is when we get more rain, so you don't have to go out there and water your lawn as much. And this is when fescue grows. So it's kind of weird, right? So you think about, like I talked about the trees and different deciduous shrubs and plants just kind of generally shutting down in the fall season. There are some that grow. We'll talk about maybe pansies in the future and mums that are blooming right now and things like that. But fescue, this is when it grows. So you're actually going to feed it with a fairly high nitrogen fertilizer because you want it to pump out growth. You want it to do all these things. So it's a great time to do that. Now, we can also talk about a little bit of the summer lawns too. It's a great time to kind of prep it for winter.
Yeah.
So we're thinking fall, you're thinking, okay, my zoysia or my St. Augustine's starting to kind of fade off a little bit as we get cooler and cooler, as we get into like the October, November timeframe. That's when you want to start thinking about potassium, which is, a protector. And so that's what you want to apply in the winter. You might see a winter survival or a winter guard or all these types of winterizer types of fertilizers. They're going to be high in potassium because that's a protector. So there's a lot of great things you could do for your lawn as the fall season approaches.
Yeah, and a lot of times what we're dealing with is sod. And I mean, it's pretty much for the same reasons Mike was saying. But, with sod, a lot of times if somebody calls up and they say they're interested in sod, our first question is, what type of sod are you looking for? Because depending on the time of year, obviously as it starts to go dormant in the fall, for warm season grasses, like you mentioned, your Bermudas and your zoysia, we don't like to install sod when it's dormant. You can do it. A lot of people do it. You see people installing the tan lawns, as I like to call them, because they're dormant at the time. They're not green. But, they're obviously not growing. They're not going to get a root system established and stuff like that. So if they call right now and they want fescue, we always tell them it's perfect timing. We can come out, get rid of your existing turf. A lot of times it's weeds and stuff that may need to be sprayed or removed. And then we'll prep it. And then you're heading into, really for sod, I like to say really around October, beginning of October, a little bit cooler because you don't need it to germinate. You really just wanted to get some root growth like that. But if they call in like June, we're saying, hey, warm season, it just depends on what you want. But I don't recommend planting fescue in the fall, like Mike was saying. And so it is definitely kind of a seasonal thing for sod for us for installation purposes. But fall is a great time to do it. It's a great time to plant it out and get it installed. And it makes it a lot easier on you. We have done fescue in certain situations in the summer. It doesn't usually, you can prep it, you can water it every day, 2 times a day, whatever the case may be. And it's still it's very stressful for those. So we are really heading into the perfect time for fescue, whether you're doing seed, sod, whatever the case may be. You're ready to roll.
Well, we just had that huge project I went out to.
Yeah, so that was St. Augustine. So that was St. Augustine, and so that was about 2,000 yards of St. Augustine. So it was a lot of sod, and it's looking great, and that's why we did that. I think that was in July, and that's the perfect time to install that, and that's what they wanted. But so what's funny is we actually signed them up in February, but we had to wait for it to green up, get cut, shipped. They don't want to cut it until it's 100% green and the roots are ready to go. So that's kind of again leaning into that process of planning out what type of sod or seed you want, and then knowing the right time to put it down because they do kind of work in different arenas. So, but yeah, that was a great one. But like I said, that was St. Augustine, so that's why we were doing it in July. If they had said fescue, I'd say I'll see you in 3 months.
So, and that's why I think
really
it's really important to. I know we've mentioned this many times before. Visit your local garden centers. Because they're the ones that live in the area, know the area the best. And so there's so many different types of grasses that you can grow for a lawn. And so talking to the local experts is the best way to go. I talk about it all the time when I talk about seed. Again, not to bash the big box stores, but you go in there and you look. And if you look at the label on the seed, so whenever you buy a bag of grass seed, there's a white label on the back and it tells you exactly what's in it. And if you look, almost all of their seed has filler in it, which means if you get a 25-pound bag of grass seed, you're actually only getting 12.5 pounds of grass seed. Because the other 12.5, because it's usually a 50-50 split, is mixed with fillers, which are like coatings and a little bit of fertilizer.
They claim it's a good thing, but it's really just less seed.
And it's probably not a horrible thing, but it is less seed. It's just less seed when you can buy a 25-pound bag of pure grass seed and with a high germination rate. And then you can go get your plant food, which you need anyways, your lawn fertilizer. You need it regardless, whether it's a little bit mixed in with the seed or not. So that's why I always say, check out your locals. They know what they're doing and they know what they're talking about. And just like Daniel said, they'll know what season is the best time to do it, whether you're getting it installed from landscape or you want to do it yourself.
Yeah, they have the answers for sure. So Daniel, when you're planning out an installation, how does fall planting fit into the timeline of the project?
So, it's interesting because we always try to do that juggling act of, we want to we work year round. We want the crews to be working year round. But we also, again, we want the customer to have as much success as possible. So a lot of times what we'll do as we get into middle to late summer is if we do have a large scale planting, we will, give them the option. If they have an irrigation system where it's set up for, watering plants and shrubs correctly, then sometimes we'll go ahead and plant in the summer and it's fine. And again, the summertime plants can still grow and they, it's not a horrible time to do it. They just need a little bit more care. But if especially if they're going to be watering it themselves and doing things of that nature, we'll say, hey, how big of a hurry are you in? Can you wait maybe 6 to 8 weeks and let us get into those cooler temperatures in fall? Again, just trying to set them up for success, obviously set the plants up for success. So a lot of times too, if it's a combination, we do a lot of hardscape projects, a lot of removals, demos. So we'll say, hey, if we want to get the ball rolling, we'll come in, we'll do the demo, we'll do kind of the more construction type activities, removals, breaking out concrete, installing the pavers, installing water features. Because I always like to do that first, because what you don't want to do is put in all these beautiful beds and then roll a bunch of equipment and stuff over those beds trying to do construction and do demo and build patios, whatever the case may be. So that's usually kind of the natural progression or order of operations of things anyway. So we'll try to kind of strategically plan it out. We're actually the perfect example of that. We're at a very, very large scale planting right now in Virginia Beach. So we started, I think it was August 11th. Okay. We got about 2.5 weeks, 3 weeks of prep. So we're going to prep for the next couple of weeks. We're right in the middle of that now. We had to do a bunch of removals, a bunch of sod cutting, stuff like that. We're in the process of doing all that. We should finish that up right around the end of August, and then we're going to start planting right around the 1st of September. Yep. It's still going to be probably a little warm knowing how it is around here, but we know that cooler weather is approaching. Still not going to be as bad as it would have been if we started planting on August 1st. And again, just trying to set the plants up for success because we want it to be warm enough to, again, stimulate some growth and stuff like that. But, we don't want it to be too bad. And the scale, again, when I was talking about in the last question was the scale of it. I mean, I think this is over 1,000 plants going in the ground total. Wow. So we really want to, do everything we can. We guarantee all of our plantings. So we want to make sure we do everything we can on our end to make sure they're successful. But also, the worst thing you want to do is have a customer invest in a project like that and then walk out the door a couple weeks later and they've got stuff struggling and wilting. And that's when that fall planting really comes into play. So really what I would say as far as how it affects the timeline is we just try to be strategic about it. And if we can kind of balance that between a construction process, maybe things that aren't actually putting plants in the ground, but it still has to happen either way. Right. And then just kind of strategically plan out when those actual plants go in the ground.
Right. Yeah. I mean, we deal with it a lot too in the garden center and retail setting, where customers like, hey, I want to do this project, or I always find it interesting when a customer says, well, I'm going to buy this now because I want it, but I'm not going to plant it. And it is a little bit of a debate, do I put it in the ground, which is a little bit trickier on the watering because, in a container, that you're watering it and it's filling up with water and it's draining out the holes and you're okay. And you can actually move it to a shadier spot if you need to keep it cooler. But it is a bit of an internal debate, a debate that sometimes I'll have with the customer. Do you want to water for the next 3 to 4 weeks in the ground, or are you going to water it every day in the pot?
Yeah.
And make it till fall. So people deal with it, whether you're dealing with it, on a timeline for a project or you're a do-it-yourselfer. We talk about those all the time with customers too in the garden center.
It's funny you say that. We were just having this debate, a little behind the scenes thing for how the landscape operates is we've had these jobs that I was just saying they'll sell in even, June, and they'll say we don't want to plant till fall.
Right.
Well, availabilities change based upon the type of material. Obviously, things that are maybe a little more showy in the fall will be more available in the fall, obviously. So, when we sold that job in June, all these plants are available. Well, then the debate becomes, okay, do we wait to order the plants in September when we're getting ready to plant? Well, then the availabilities could change, and those plants that we just sold and contracted won't be available. So then, okay, do we bring in the plants now, and then we got to care for them for 3 months, and now we have irrigation and everything set up. So that's usually what we do. And again, there's different plants that we know are always available, like tried and trues. Okay, we don't need to bring those in early. But when we look through, that's what we try to do is kind of look through those contracts and say, okay, this is available now. We need to bring this in now, and we'll take care of it for the next couple months just to try to guarantee that customer gets what they want. But we were just having this conversation because we're kind of reworking the irrigation in our back area, and we were just talking about how big of a holding area we need for that very reason. So it's a debate debate between everybody, homeowners and contractors alike, of how long and how easy it is to take care of that stuff.
A lot of moving parts.
Yep.
All right. So this one's for the both of you.
All right.
What's one myth about fall planting you'd love to clear up here on the podcast?
You want to take it away? Go for it.
I'll take mine first, and this is a pretty common one, and Mike even kind of alluded to it a little bit earlier, but it's, what is fall? People think of fall as, Labor Day comes, and it's like, okay, now we're heading into fall. So they think September, October is really what fall is.
Yeah.
Because then I think once you hit November, you're thinking Thanksgiving, holidays, people start decorating for Christmas, and November 1st, that's a big debate around my house, so I'm not going to get into that. But so that's my myth would be that fall is basically September and kind of the first half of October before you start really getting into Halloween. Because for me, again, fall is from a planting standpoint, I'd rather plant all the way through November, even through December a lot of times around here before, I'd rather plant in December than June for sure, just from, again, an acclimation standpoint, that time period before, the summer heat hits, kind of all the things we've been talking about. And this is obviously, we're talking right now more so for that southeast Tidewater, Virginia area. It's different wherever you're at. We deal with, we have this garden center kind of power. We deal with other garden centers across the country, and it's funny when you hear them talking about how they have to start shutting down installations in middle to end of October because the ground starts to freeze, and it's like, we're just, depending on where you're at, it's just completely different. So for us, I'd say the biggest myth for our area is that timeline of fall, because honestly, it's in September, we can still have easily 80, maybe even hit a 90-degree day in September, 100%. Whereas in November, we could definitely have some mid-60s, 70s even, which is perfect planting. So my biggest myth would just be kind of that timeline of what fall is and what you really want to do, because if you haven't gotten your plants in by October 1, don't panic. You still got a couple months to do it of prime planting time from everything I've seen. So that would be probably my biggest myth of just kind of what fall means around here. And what that is.
It's a great point. It really is. And mine kind of, is similar, which is there's not much at the garden center in the fall. Obviously, I come from a retail standpoint, and I think people think, fall, I'll get out there and do some stuff, maybe work on my lawn, maybe a couple other things. But there is a ton of great options in the fall. I mean, even when it comes to like annuals, you think of in the fall, it's just mums and pansies. Well, and mums are really a perennial, but in our area, but there's so many options. I mean, from your, vegetable gardens where you can do cole crops like lettuces and spinaches and carrots and beets and turnips. There's so many options when it comes to, color, whether it's using some of those ornamental things like Swiss chard or the ornamental cabbages and kales. There's a lot that you can do in containers. You can add perennials into your containers. I love ferns and heucheras. And then, of course, trees and shrubs are, my passion and my love. So those are the things that I think about. And even when it comes to, houseplants, you start to get these floral mums and crotons, and there's just so many things that you can do. I mean, you can decorate your porch or patio. You can, talk about your Halloween and your fall decor. And then, of course, umbrellas and enjoying the outdoors and fire pits, and the list goes on and on. So there's so many things that you can do outdoors in the fall. We'll even be talking a little bit about it for the next episode. But it's a great time to visit the garden center. I always say that. I know I said it a lot in the spring, come in every week or two, because it's changing. It changes so fast in the fall. I mean, we have tons of events, and it's just that kind of community feel, and it's a great time to be in the garden center and kind of experience everything that we're offering. And so that would be my myth that I would bust.
Well, and it's just like
going on.
Yeah, it's just like you said with wanting to be outdoors to do the actual work. You also want to be outdoors now to enjoy your outdoor area. Whether we talked about it some in the spring. Is in the spring you want to enjoy it. You want to be doing barbecues, whatever the case may be, and enjoying. We talked about hardscapes, dining sets, all that kind of stuff. Well, the fall is the same thing. That's when you have those cool nights. It's not cold necessarily where you don't want to be outside, but it's cool enough to where you're not sitting around a fire pit just sweating profusely. You actually want to be around a fire pit. I was associated with football, and so I started getting all excited about fall. So again, like Mike said, you just want to be outdoors and you want to enjoy it. And then again, there's also a lot of things obviously spring has a lot of showy flowers and things like that, but there's a lot of cool flowers in fall. And I think one of our topics coming up is plants that really, show out in the fall and some of our favorite fall plants.
Right.
And so definitely if you're interested in planting in the fall, come back for that one, because we're going to be going over a lot of different ones that really show off in the fall as opposed to spring.
Yeah, and I will say, I think we've sold fall.
Yeah.
It's a great time to plant.
Absolutely.
You ready to go plant? All right.
I am.
But I will say, still listen to our past podcasts, because so if this is the first time you're listening, then definitely subscribe to our channel and listen to some of the past ones, because we still want you to do some of those important things like amending your soil.
Yep.
You still got to water properly. I mean, you still got to feed. I mean, that's another myth that I kind of wrote down we didn't talk about, but feeding in the fall is still important. So there's all of these things that you got to do still. It's not like you can just dig a hole and drop a plant in, and fall is just so amazing that he mentioned September, really October, November, December in our neck of the woods is a better time to plant. September can be hot. So, I mean, if we get hot weather, you got to be prepared for that. There are some challenges. So I don't want to say that it's all just super easy and fun, but it is a great time. It's still the number one time to plant. I don't want to take away from that. I think we've sold you on that. Just want to say, don't just make it feel like you can just go and plant anything and you'll be perfectly successful. So listen to all of our other podcasts. I mentioned that fall is a great time to, be outside, and we're going to talk about another activity that you can do outside for our next podcast, which is birding. Yes. Really fun topic, I think. What plants can you plant? What can you do to entice the birds into your backyard or front yard or wherever you might want to be? It's a lot of fun, and we'll get into that next week. Y'all got anything else to add for this episode?
No, not really. I mean,
excited for fall. Let's do it.
Yep. Fall is here. So thanks for listening to our podcast, The Bros of Gardening. We'll be back next week to talk about birding, and we'll see you then.